The first time my sister tried to take Titan from me, I was still using the kitchen counter to hold myself upright. My knee was wrapped so tight it felt like it was full of hot wires. My shoulder still clicked every time I lifted my arm, and the pain meds left a bitter film in the back of my throat that never really went away. She stood in the middle of my living room like she belonged there, one hand on her hip, the other dangling Titan's leash from two fingers, smiling at me like my whole life had already been sorted out without my permission. I remember the way Titan looked at her, not barking, not moving, just staring with that cold, focused stillness he only used when something felt wrong. That should have told me everything. But when betrayal comes from family, you spend too long trying to call it concern. Titan wasn't just a dog to me. He was my partner for 6 years on the sheriff's department. 120 pounds of muscle, discipline, instinct, and loyalty I trusted more than I trusted most people. He was a sable German shepherd with a scar over one eye from our second year together, when a burglary suspect came out of a garage swinging a crowbar and Titan hit him before I even had time to register what I was seeing. He had found missing kids in the woods, tracked a man through freezing rain, and once stayed pressed against my chest for almost an hour after a call that went bad and left me sitting on the pavement trying not to shake in front of the other deputies. People love to talk about how smart police dogs are, how brave, how impressive. What they don't talk about is how human the bond feels when you've built your whole rhythm of life around another heartbeat. Before everything broke, my days were simple in the way hard-earned routines can be simple. Early training, patrol, reports, feed Titan, check his paws, clean his gear. Late coffee at the kitchen table under the window in the house my father left me and my sister after he passed. It wasn't a big house, just an old ranch place outside town with peeling shutters and a sagging fence. I was always fixing one board at a time, but it was the last place that still felt like something in my life had roots. My sister Vanessa had never loved that house. She said it smelled like dust, old coffee, and bad memories. The truth was, she hated anything that reminded her life wasn't always supposed to revolve around her. Growing up, Vanessa knew how to make herself the center of every room without ever looking like she was trying. She cried prettier than anyone I've ever seen. Even as a kid, she could turn a bad decision into a story where she somehow needed rescuing. She was the one who borrowed money and forgot to pay it back, wrecked cars and blamed weather, dated men with expensive watches and cheap morals, and somehow still got people to call her misunderstood instead of irresponsible. I was the steady one. The useful one, the one who stayed. If you've ever been that person in a family, you already know how dangerous that role can become. People stop seeing your loyalty as love and start treating it like a resource. The call that ended my career started out small. A domestic disturbance in a trailer park just off Route 17. We'd been to that address before, nothing about it felt new until the back door burst open and the guy ran for the tree line with a handgun tucked against his leg. Titan tracked him fast, I followed. I remember wet leaves, my boots slipping, my radio crackling, my lungs burning in cold air. Then I remember the shot, then impact, then the world going sideways. The bullet missed anything fatal, but the fall down the embankment shredded my knee and tore my shoulder bad enough that the surgeon later told me I was lucky to be walking at all. Lucky. That word sat in my stomach like a stone. There I was at 38, staring at scans under fluorescent hospital lights, realizing the only thing I'd ever done that made sense to me might be over. Titan came home before I did. The department let him stay with a friend from the K9 unit until I was discharged, then retired him into my custody because everybody knew he was mine in every way that mattered. When I got back to the house, he met me at the door and pressed his head carefully against my chest like he understood exactly how much weight I could take. I buried my hand in the fur behind his ears and felt something crack open inside me, not in a dramatic way. More like a quiet collapse. The kind that happens when you realize the only reason you're keeping it together is because something loyal is leaning against your leg. The first week home was ugly. Bills stacked up on the table, the disability paperwork stalled, my paid leave was a mess. Every step felt like walking on glass wrapped in fire. I was sleeping in 90-minute chunks and waking up drenched in sweat from dreams I could never fully remember. That was when Vanessa called and used the soft voice she only Eve R used when she wanted access. She said she was worried. She said I shouldn't be alone while recovering. She said she could stay a little while, help with groceries, laundry, anything I needed. I should have said no. I knew I should have. But there's a kind of exhaustion that makes bad ideas sound like mercy, and I was deep in it. At first, her help looked almost real. She brought food I didn't ask for, reorganized cabinets I had never told her to touch, wiped down counters so hard she acted like the house had personally offended her. She told our mother she was keeping an eye on me. She told family friends she was stepping in because that was what sisters did. Every sentence from her came gift-wrapped in generosity, but something about the way she watched the house made the skin on the back of my neck pull tight. Her eyes lingered on the framed deed from my father, on the old lockbox in the study, on Titan's equipment hanging near the mudroom door. She asked questions that sounded casual until you replayed them later. How much had the county paid on the injury claims so far? Whether retired K9s still held any value for private security firms? If I had considered selling the property and moving somewhere smaller? Titan never relaxed around her. That was new. He was not a nervous dog. He could sleep through thunderstorms and ignore strangers at the vet like they were furniture. But whenever Vanessa came into a room, his ears shifted forward and his chest got still. Not aggressive, just watchful. I'd catch him standing in doorways, blocking narrow spaces without seeming to. Once I woke up on the couch and found him lying across the hall outside my bedroom while Vanessa moved around in the kitchen before dawn. She laughed when I mentioned it and said he was probably getting protective because I was injured. But her smile tightened at the edges when she said it, and Titan kept staring. Then Brent started coming over. Brent was Vanessa's latest great love, which in her world usually meant a man polished enough to fool people for 6 months and hollow enough to disappear when consequences showed up. He wore fitted shirts, too much cologne, and the kind of confidence that only ever comes from not having done enough honest work to be humbled by it. He shook my hand too long the first time we met and kept glancing at Titan like he was calculating numbers. Vanessa said Brent had contacts in private security, that he knew people who would appreciate a dog with Titan's background. The way she said appreciate made my jaw lock so hard my temples hurt. I told them Titan was retired, not for sale, not a business opportunity, and not open for discussion. Brent grinned like I'd made a joke. Vanessa rolled her eyes and said I was being sensitive because of the injury. That word again, sensitive. It's amazing how often disrespect borrows the language of concern. If you've ever had someone flatten your instincts into an overreaction so they could keep crossing the line, you know exactly how that feels. A few days later, I found a photo of Vanessa online with Titan sitting beside her on the porch. She had dressed him in a cheap tactical vest she bought without asking me, one with a fake service patch stitched crooked across the side. The caption made my stomach turn. She called him her protector, her loyal boy, her shadow, hundreds of likes, comments about how powerful they looked together. She had built an entire little performance out of a bond she had not earned. When I confronted her, she gave me that same infuriating smile and said social media was harmless. Then she said maybe the dog needed someone strong handling him while I healed. My vision tunneled for a second. I could feel my pulse in my gums. That night I barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, Titan's head snapped up from the rug beside my bed, no bark, just instant alertness. He moved toward the hallway low and silent, and I followed as fast as my knee would let me, grabbing the cane by the nightstand on the way. Brent was in my father's study with the desk drawer halfway open. He said he had been looking for a phone charger. The lie was so thin it almost embarrassed me to hear it. Titan stood between him and the door, muscles tight, lips barely lifting at the corners. Brent's whole body changed then. Men like him always think dogs are props until they meet one that knows the difference between movement and intent. Vanessa came running at the sound of us in the hall and somehow turned the whole thing around before sunrise. She said Brent had been trying to help. She said I was paranoid. She said pain medication was making me suspicious. Those words stuck because they were carefully chosen, not angry enough to look cruel, not gentle enough to feel loving, just strategic. I stared at her and felt something cold spread through my chest. This wasn't ordinary selfishness anymore. This was mapping, measuring, testing how much of my life she could move while telling me I was imagining it. 3 days after that, my lieutenant called. There had been a complaint filed about Titan. Anonymous at first, then quietly traced to an email created through a throwaway account. The complaint claimed I was abusing pain medication, neglecting Titan's training and exercise, and losing my temper around him. It also claimed Titan had shown aggression toward children on the property. Animal control wanted a welfare check. Internal review wanted to verify he was safe to remain in my custody. I could hear blood rushing in my ears while my lieutenant talked. Every detail in that complaint came from inside the house. Information about my medication, my rehab schedule, my yard, the temporary fencing repair near the back gate, things strangers did not know. I looked at Vanessa across the kitchen while the phone was still in my hand. She was slicing strawberries like she was in a cooking commercial, calm as summer water. When I asked if she knew anything about it, she didn't even blink. She said maybe one of the neighbors saw me limping and got concerned. Then she asked whether I had really been sleeping enough. My whole body went rigid. There are moments when rage doesn't explode, it hardens, it becomes precision. The welfare check happened the next day. Titan passed, of course, perfect obedience. Clean coat, good weight, responsive, controlled. The officer actually complimented his discipline and told me most retired working dogs were nowhere near his condition. But the damage was already working its way through my life. My lieutenant suggested, gently, that maybe I should consider a temporary alternate home until things settled. My mother called crying because Vanessa had apparently told her I was struggling more than I admitted. 2 cousins texted to say they were praying for me and that pride could stop people from accepting help. That's the thing about a lie built by family. It arrives wearing the face of concern, and by the time you realize what it is, half the room is already treating you like the problem. Vanessa leaned into it. She started talking about what was best for Titan. She mentioned Brent's friend with land. She said a retired K9 deserved space to run and a handler who was fully functional. She said it kindly, almost sadly, like she hated being the one forced to acknowledge reality. My knee throbbed so hard I had to grip the edge of the sink when she said it. Then she touched my arm and told me not to take it personally. I pulled away so fast the room spun. Around the same time, another problem surfaced. The property taxes on the house were behind by almost a full quarter, which made no sense because I had been paying my half and assumed Vanessa, who had inherited the other half with me after Dad died, had been paying hers through the estate account. She hadn't. She had missed payments for months, then used family money for something else and hoped I wouldn't notice until it became urgent. When I confronted her, she tried to fold that into the same performance. She said money had been tight. She said Brent was between opportunities. She said once my settlement came through, everything could be smoothed out. That was when I understood she wasn't just circling Titan, she was circling the whole collapse. The dog, the house, my injury, my isolation. She wasn't helping me survive a bad season. She was arranging herself to profit from it. That realization still sits in me like a blade. I thought my sister was standing close because I was hurt. The truth was simpler and uglier. She was only close enough to measure what she could steal before I stood back up. If you've ever had that kind of clarity hit all at once, then you know it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels like the floor giving way. I went out to the back porch that evening and sat there with Titan pressed against my good leg while the sun dropped behind the tree line. My hands were shaking so badly I had to lace them together to stop it. I kept replaying every small thing Vanessa had done, the fake concern, the social media posts, Brent in the study, the complaint, the taxes, all of it. Titan leaned harder into me until I could feel his heartbeat through my palm, steady and certain. I remember thinking that animals never confuse love with access. They either trust you or they don't. Humans can live inside a lie for years. The next twist came from my mother. She asked me to come see her at the assisted living place, and I drove there with my knee screaming each time I moved it from gas to brake. She looked smaller than usual when I walked in, folded into the armchair by the window with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. She kept blinking like she was trying to focus past a fog. Then she admitted Vanessa had brought her paperwork a few weeks earlier and asked her to sign it while she was adjusting to a new medication. She had been told it was insurance paperwork and temp. A rare authorization to help manage household bills while I recovered. It was. It was a durable power of attorney, plus preliminary transfer documents that would give Vanessa control over estate decisions if I was deemed medically unfit to manage the shared property. My mouth went dry so fast I could barely swallow. My mother started crying then, quiet at first, then in those awful little breaths people take when shame hurts as much as grief. I knelt down as best I could beside her chair, and the pain in my knee flashed white behind my eyes. She kept saying she hadn't understood, that Vanessa had rushed her, that she thought she was helping me. I held her hand and felt my own chest tightening until it was hard to breathe. I wasn't angry at her, I couldn't be. Vanessa had used the same instinct on all of us. She had found the softest place in the family and pressed until it opened. With copies of the paperwork from my mother's attorney, I finally had something concrete. Not enough yet, but something. I called an old friend from the department who knew enough about digital tracing to look at the anonymous complaint metadata. He couldn't officially pull favors, but he could tell me whether my instincts were crazy. 2 days later, he called back and said the complaint had originated from a Wi-Fi network registered to Brent's apartment. The email had been created on a device that also accessed Vanessa's social accounts within the same hour. My friend didn't say much after that. He didn't need to. My teeth were clenched so hard my jaw trembled. I started locking the study. I moved Dad's remaining papers into a safe deposit box. I cut off Vanessa's access to the estate account. I called the county clerk and flagged any transfer activity. I told Brent he wasn't welcome on the property anymore. That was when their masks started slipping. Vanessa stopped pretending to care whether I ate. She stopped using the soft voice. She moved through the house like a tenant who resented being charged rent, slamming drawers, leaving lights on, muttering just loud enough to be heard. She told relatives I was becoming bitter. She told one aunt I was letting a dog come between me and family. Brent sent me one message saying men who couldn't let go usually lost everything harder. It was the kind of line weak men think sounds powerful. Still, it left a taste of metal in my mouth. And through all of it, Titan kept watching. He started doing something I'd only seen a few times on duty. Every time Vanessa entered the room, he would place himself where he could see both of us at once. Not touching me, not crowding, just splitting the angle, creating a barrier. It was controlled enough that most people wouldn't notice, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. He also kept checking one particular tote bag Vanessa carried everywhere, a tan leather thing she guarded like it held cash. Whenever she set it down, Titan's nose would flare and his attention would sharpen. The first time I told myself it could be anything. The second time I knew better. One afternoon, while Vanessa was out and I was icing my knee on the couch, Titan suddenly left the room and went to the front hall closet. He sat in front of it and stared. That was his trained alert. My stomach tightened. I opened the closet and found a small lockbox shoved behind winter coats. It was my father's, the same one Brent had clearly been hunting in the study. Inside were copies of the deed, old insurance records, my father's handwritten note naming how he wanted the house handled if either of us tried to force a sale while the other still lived there, and a folded envelope with 2 cashier's checks Vanessa had apparently hidden after taking them from the estate mail. She hadn't even cashed them yet. She was stockpiling leverage. This part still makes me pause when I think about it because that was the moment all my remaining denial died. Not when the complaint came in, not when my mother cried over the papers. It was when I saw that lockbox hidden inside my own house and realized Vanessa had been stealing from me in stages, slow enough to look like confusion if she got caught. There's something especially cruel about being betrayed in increments. It forces you to watch your trust die more than once. I should have thrown her out immediately. Looking back, I know that. But legal advice told me to move carefully because of the shared inheritance and the paperwork she had already tried to move through. So I waited, I documented everything, I saved screenshots, I copied records, I asked a deputy friend to be nearby the following Saturday when Vanessa told the family she wanted everyone over for a small lunch to clear the air. Clear the air, even now that phrase makes my skin crawl. By then my injury had started healing just enough for the pain to trade its sharp edges for a deep, ugly ache. I could walk better, though not well. My shoulder still burned at night. The job was G. One for good, the surgeon had made that plain. I would never run the same again. Never take Titan on a track again. Never clip on that uniform with the same certainty. Losing that future felt like grieving someone who was still technically alive. And right in the center of that grief was Vanessa, trying to turn what remained of my life into a liquidation. Saturday came heavy and hot, the kind of heat that makes shirts stick between the shoulder blades. Family filled the backyard with paper plates and careful smiles. My mother came with my aunt. Brent arrived late in mirrored sunglasses and carried himself like a man certain he would leave with what he came for. Titan stayed on a downstay near my chair, calm and still, ears flicking now and then at distant noises beyond the fence. Anyone looking from the outside would have said it was a normal family gathering. That's what makes some betrayals so sickening. They happen in daylight, with lemonade sweating on plastic tables and children playing 10 feet away. Vanessa waited until enough people were present before making her move. She stood near the patio, hand resting on the back of one of my father's old chairs, and launched into a speech about concern, stability, healing, and difficult decisions. She talked about how much she loved me. She talked about the burden of being the one willing to act. She talked about Titan as though he were a shared family heirloom instead of a working dog who had bled beside me. Then she produced papers, handler transfer forms, temporary care authorization, a statement claiming I had voluntarily agreed that Titan should remain with her while I continued recovery. The signature at the bottom was mine, or close enough to fool anyone who didn't know it had been traced from hospital paperwork. My fingertips went numb. Then she looked right at me, that smug little curve pulling at one corner of her mouth, and announced in front of everyone that Titan belonged with her now. Not because she loved him more, not because she understood him, because she thought my weakness had made me unable to stop her. She reached for the leash clipped beside my chair. Everything changed in 1 second. Titan came up from his downstay so fast the chair legs scraped backward on the patio. Not wild, not out of control, controlled power. His whole body shifted between Vanessa and me like a door slamming shut. His head dropped, his shoulders squared. A growl rolled out of him so deep it seemed to vibrate through the deck boards. The conversation around us died mid-breath. Vanessa froze with her hand half extended, all the color draining from her face. She had spent weeks using him as a prop for pictures and posts, so I think some part of her truly believed that meant she knew him. But Titan knew the difference between someone posing beside him and someone trying to take what wasn't theirs. Brent swore and stepped forward like he could fix it with force. That was his mistake. He moved toward me first, not Titan. Fast, angry, one arm reaching like he meant to shove me aside and grab the leash himself. Titan read the intent before I fully did. One explosive movement, a blur of black and tan. Brent hit the patio hard with a sound I still hear sometimes at night, all breath punched out of him in a single shocked grunt. Titan locked onto his forearm in a textbook apprehension hold, controlled and exact, not tearing, not thrashing, just pinning him where he dropped and daring him to keep making bad choices. My aunt screamed. Plates hit the grass. My mother stood there with both hands over her mouth, shaking. I got to my feet so fast my injured knee nearly folded under me. Pain shot straight through my leg and up into my spine, but adrenaline drowned most of it. Titan held Brent perfectly, eyes up, waiting for direction. Then Brent did the dumbest thing a man can do around a trained dog in a protection bite. He reached toward his waistband. The deputy I had asked to stay nearby was already moving through the side gate. He covered Brent in seconds, ordered him flat, and only then did I give Titan the release. Titan came off clean, backing straight to my side but staying tight and ready, every line of him still humming with controlled tension. Brent curled on the patio, cursing through clenched teeth. The deputy recovered a small handgun from Brent's waistband that he had no permit to carry, then searched the truck after seeing, in plain view, a folder on the passenger seat with copies of the forged handler transfer paperwork and a crate already lined with a blanket and a water bowl. That sight made something inside me go cold all over again. They had not come to convince me, they had come to remove Titan. And that still wasn't the worst of it. When the deputy opened Brent's truck fully, he found more than papers. He found the missing pain medication Vanessa had claimed I must have misplaced. He found a state mail addressed to the house. He found a and TED valuation sheet for retired working dogs being marketed to private contractors overseas and domestically. He found notes. Real notes, pages of them, dates, dollar figures, property value estimates, the expected settlement from my injury claim, a line about pressuring mom again if legal resistance continued, another line about documenting me during bad pain days to build a case for incapacity. My stomach lurched so hard I thought I might actually throw up. Vanessa tried to recover. Even then she tried. She said Brent had acted alone. She said she didn't know about the gun. She said I was twisting everything. Then the deputy pulled a second set of papers from her tote bag, the one Titan kept alerting on. Signed but not filed, revised property transfer forms. If Brent was the hammer, Vanessa was the hand aiming it. She stepped toward me then, maybe out of panic, maybe out of habit, maybe because people like her always think one more performance can still fix the story. Titan cut her off instantly. He planted himself between us again, lips lifting just enough to show white teeth, that low warning rumbling up through his chest. Not frenzied, not confused, certain. He had accepted her presence when he thought she was noise around me. The second she became threat, he made his choice. In that moment, with my whole family staring, it felt like the only honest thing in the yard. No one defended her after that. Not my aunt, not my mother, not the cousins who had texted me about pride. Everyone just stood there in the wreckage of what Vanessa had built, staring at the papers, the truck, Brent on the ground clutching his arm, Titan pressed against my leg like living steel. My mother sat down hard in one of the patio chairs and looked 10 years older in 10 seconds. Vanessa kept talking, but her words had lost whatever spell they once carried. Once the truth is visible, manipulation starts sounding exactly like what it is. Brent was arrested that day. Illegal firearm, theft, fraud-related charges, enough to begin unraveling the rest. Vanessa was not handcuffed on the spot, but she left with a detective and a face so empty it barely looked like hers. In the weeks that followed, more came out. She had tried to shop Titan's background quietly through Brent's contacts. She had already spoken to someone about a quick sale of her share of the house contingent on gaining control of the estate paperwork. She had kept records of my rehab appointments to build a case that I was unstable. Every discovery felt like pressing on a bruise you thought had finally stopped hurting. People always ask after something like that whether I cut her off immediately. The truth is messier. She was my sister. Blood doesn't stop meaning anything just because it starts costing too much. There were nights I sat in the dark with Titan asleep across the doorway and felt grief move through me in waves so heavy I had to breathe through my teeth to stay steady. Not grief for the relationship we had, because that was never what I thought it was. Grief for the relationship I kept hoping could still exist if I was patient enough, loyal enough, useful enough. Tell me I'm not alone in knowing how long people can mourn something that never fully lived. My mother apologized more times than she needed to. I kept telling her the blame belonged where the choices were made. She moved in with my aunt for a while until the paperwork settled and the estate attorney finished cleaning up the mess Vanessa created. The house stayed with me, not because I won some grand battle, but because my father had written one stubborn line years earlier saying no child of his should ever force the other out of his home through pressure or trickery while breath still sat in their lungs. That line saved me more than anyone knew. Titan retired fully after that. No more department obligations, no more certifications to maintain, just long walks, slower training games in the yard, and lazy evenings where he would rest his head on my knee like checking whether I was still there. Recovery went on longer than I wanted. Some mornings my leg still felt like it belonged to someone else. The job never came back. I had to build something new from pieces I didn't trust yet. Eventually, I started helping the department with civilian canine assessments and basic obedience consultations. Then veterans. Then a few families with working breed rescues no one else would touch. It wasn't the life I planned, but it was a life that fit the man I had become after surviving the one I lost. I heard from Vanessa once, months later, not directly at first, a letter through her attorney, soft language, regret without detail, accountability without confession. The kind of carefully packaged remorse meant to reduce consequences rather than face them. I didn't answer. Some doors do not slam. They close quietly with both hands steady because you finally understand how much peace is worth. Sometimes P.O. Please hear this story and focus on the dog. On the bite. On the moment Titan rose between me and Vanessa like judgment finally taking shape. And I get it, it's the dramatic part, it's the kind of moment people replay because it feels clean. The loyal partner choosing truth over blood. But the real story was never just about whether Titan turned on my sister. It was about the day I stopped turning on myself to keep family comfortable. That was the harder thing. Because long before Vanessa forged papers or hid lockboxes or tried to walk off with my partner, I had already been betraying myself in smaller ways. I had been excusing disrespect because it came in a familiar voice. I had been treating my boundaries like bargaining chips. I had been confusing endurance with love. Titan never made that mistake. He never once apologized for recognizing danger. He never once worried whether protecting me would make the room uncomfortable. He saw what was in front of him and acted accordingly. Clean, immediate, honest. There's a lesson in that I didn't want and desperately needed. Loyalty is beautiful, but without boundaries, it becomes a weapon people use against you. Family can wound you in places strangers never reach because they know exactly where you still hope to be chosen. And sometimes the moment that saves you is not someone finally loving you the way they should. Sometimes it's the moment you accept that they won't and you stop handing them pieces of yourself to prove you're worth keeping. Titan is older now. His muzzle has gone gray around the edges and he takes the porch steps slower than he used to. On quiet nights, he still lies across the front door, half asleep, like some part of him refuses to retire from watching over this place. I sit beside him sometimes with a cup of coffee cooling in my hands and think about how close I came to losing everything that still mattered. Not just the house, not just the dog, myself. And every time that thought lands, Titan opens one eye, checks that I'm there, and settles again. Maybe that's why the memory of Vanessa's smirk doesn't sting the way it used to, because in the end, she really did tell me everything I needed to know. She thought weakness made me disposable. She thought loyalty could be transferred like ownership. She thought love meant access. Titan taught her otherwise, and me too. Some people only stay in your life as long as you're willing to disappear for them. The day you stop, they call it betrayal. But sometimes losing their version of you is the first time you finally get to keep yourself.